There's no doubt this terrible event has happened again. It's been 3 weeks since the biggest explosion in SpaceX's 23-year history rocked the Massey test site. For a while, it seemed like the whole thing had faded away. But no, the rumors are only getting louder. There's growing speculation that something's off, and that SpaceX could be keeping certain details under wraps. Even worse, some believe this wasn't just an accident at all, but a case of internal sabotage, a suspicious déjà vu of what happened 9 years ago. So, was it just a technical failure, or something much darker? And how will SpaceX deal with this issue? Let's break down on today's episode of Alpha Tech. Elon Musk has always been a lightning rod for both passionate fans and fierce critics, all thanks to his bold personality, unfiltered communication style, and his wild dream of sending humanity to Mars. His way of speaking is often provocative, sometimes even confrontational, breaking away from traditional norms. He's not afraid to fire back, even at the president. And while that boldness wins him devoted followers, it also stirs up plenty of controversy. Let's not forget, Musk currently runs some of the most powerful companies on Earth: SpaceX, Starlink, Tesla, X, formerly Twitter, and The Boring Company. So naturally, with that kind of influence, he doesn't just attract haters, he also makes enemies. Real ones, including powerful competitors and shadowy forces we may never see. And things only got more intense when Musk stepped into the world of politics. As the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, he helped slash U.S. federal spending by an incredible $175 billion. A massive win for taxpayers, but also a big threat to many entrenched interests. It didn't take long before the pressure forced him to step away from the political arena. And now, after SpaceX's most devastating Starship explosion yet, the Ship 36 disaster at Massey on June 18th, many are starting to connect the dots. Was this really just a technical failure, or was it sabotage? Some believe there's more going on than SpaceX is letting on. To uncover the truth behind Ship 36, let's rewind the clock for a moment. At 11:01 p.m. on June 18, 2025, at the Massey test site in Starbase, Texas, while SpaceX was preparing for a static fire test of Ship 36, a critical step toward the 10th flight of Starship, no one expected disaster, one that would end up torching $300 million from SpaceX's budget. It all started with a COPV, a composite overwrapped pressure vessel containing nitrogen, quietly building pressure inside the payload bay. This was the silent heart of the rocket, wrapped in thousands of carbon fibers, designed to withstand extreme forces. But this time, something went wrong. No one knew if it was a manufacturing flaw or damage during transport, but it turned the tank into a ticking time bomb. Boom! The explosion tore through the calm Texas night for miles. The COPV ruptured, slicing into the liquid methane tank, triggering a catastrophic chain reaction. Flames erupted from within the payload bay, engulfing Ship 36 in seconds, its stainless steel body shredded like paper. The blast damaged key infrastructure at the test site, including fuel lines and the static fire stand, setting back the Starship program significantly. Although SpaceX and Elon Musk officially stated the cause was a faulty COPV, something strange happened just a few days later. On July 5th, witnesses at McGregor site saw thick white smoke pouring into the sky, and moments later, a black object was blasted high into the air. Most believe it was part of a secret COPV test, possibly aimed at recreating the failure that destroyed Ship 36. And judging by the intensity of the test, SpaceX may have found their answer that day. What's unsettling is how much this situation mirrors the sabotage drama that hit ULA 9 years ago. But before we dive into that, a new report is raising eyebrows. Just days before the Ship 36 explosion, a SpaceX employee posted on X raising concerns about safety practices. He claimed that SpaceX had been hiring local workers on a temporary basis, many of whom lacked experience or any background in aerospace. And according to him, they had been violating strict COPV handling procedures. He described careless behavior, like deliberately slamming the COPV tanks against the mounting brackets during transport. Even after being reminded to follow the rules, they stuck to bad habits, joking around on the job and blatantly ignoring safety protocols. And how did he know all this? because he was one of only 2 certified COPV inspectors on site, directly responsible for evaluating the condition of each tank before and after installation inside Starship. His job was to log impact reports, assess potential damage, and ensure every COPV met safety standards. But after he flagged these unsafe practices, something strange happened. He was suddenly banned from accessing the payload sections of 2 starships. Frustrated, he shared his story publicly. Now, was this just negligence or something more sinister? Was someone intentionally trying to sabotage SpaceX from within? That part is still unclear. But if true, it may be time for SpaceX to tighten its hiring standards. After all, the company has a lot to lose, especially if news spreads that internal safety procedures were ignored. Sabotage or not, one thing's clear. Everyone working on Starship needs to take this seriously. Because this isn't just another rocket, it's humanity's best shot at reaching Mars. So, what do you think? Was this sabotage? Drop a 1 in the comments if you agree, or share your thoughts below. Let's talk about it. Many people reject the sabotage theory, arguing that the explosion was actually the result of a design flaw in Starship itself. After all, this isn't the first time the vehicle has blown up. Starship has failed 3 times in a row, from integrated test flight 7 to flight 9. But let's take a closer look. Those previous failures happened under extreme conditions during high-speed atmospheric re-entry when the vehicle was being pushed to its absolute limits. This time was different. Ship 36 hadn't even flown yet. It was simply being loaded with propellant in preparation for a static fire test. If this was really a design flaw, then why did Falcon 9, a rocket that's flown 511 successful missions with a 99.4% success rate, suffer a similar issue? Let's not forget, Booster B1067 just set a new record, 29 successful reuses. That's a level of reliability no other rocket on Earth has achieved. What I'm referring to is the incident on September 1st, 2016, over 9 years ago, when a Falcon 9 rocket exploded during preparations for a static fire test at Space Launch Complex 40. At the time, the rocket was carrying the $200 million Amos-6 communications satellite, owned by Israeli company Spacecom. It was set to provide internet coverage to parts of Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, including a contract with Facebook to support their Internet.org initiative. During fueling operations ahead of the test, disaster struck. The explosion originated in the rocket's upper stage, unleashing a massive fireball followed by a series of violent secondary blasts. Within seconds, both the Falcon 9 and the Amos-6 satellite were completely destroyed. Interestingly, the sound of the explosion wasn't what most would expect. According to Professor Daniel M. Nosenchuk of Princeton University, the blast didn't produce a typical detonation shockwave. Instead, it sounded more like a rapid-fire event, a sharp whoosh rather than a deep boom. This unusual signature sparked intense debate. Was this truly an accident, or something more deliberate? Some even suggested the possibility of external sabotage. Nothing like this had ever happened before to what was considered the world's safest rocket. The lack of a clear explanation sent SpaceX engineers down a rabbit hole of theories, hundreds of them. One of the most shocking, that a sniper, possibly hired by a competitor, had fired at the rocket from a distance. The idea was so compelling that even Elon Musk took it seriously. Just hours after the incident, Musk began hinting that something may have struck the rocket mid-fueling. He posted on X, particularly trying to understand the quieter bang sound a few seconds before the fireball goes off. May come from rocket or something else. That one sentence fueled widespread speculation. Other engineers at SpaceX started entertaining the possibility as well, especially since there were some odd details that seemed to support it. The initial explosion occurred roughly 200 feet above the ground, on the rocket's southwest side. Coincidentally, about a mile away in that very direction stood a building leased by United Launch Alliance, SpaceX's main competitor in that launch campaign. A separate video appeared to show a shadowy figure on the rooftop of that building, now known as the Spaceflight Operations Processing Center. Even stranger, the timing of the shadow's movement aligned almost exactly with the time it would have taken for a fast-moving object to travel from the building to the rocket. SpaceX quickly requested access to inspect the roof for signs of tampering, but found no conclusive evidence of sabotage. "We actually thought someone had shot the rocket," Musk later revealed in an interview at SpaceX HQ in Hawthorne, California. "We found things that looked like bullet holes, and when we did the math, if someone had used a high-powered rifle and hit the rocket in the right spot, this is exactly what would have happened." But SpaceX didn't stop at the sniper theory. They also considered the possibility of an internal failure. Early signs pointed to something causing one of the helium tanks, located in the rocket's upper stage, to explode. To investigate further, engineers at SpaceX's McGregor test site in Texas tried to recreate the blast. But as SpaceX President Gwynne Shotwell later recalled, "We were having trouble blowing up these tanks." So they went with a more direct method. "We got a rifle," Shotwell said, "and we shot it." To their surprise, the signature on the bottle was just like the signature on the bottle that we recovered. That was an easy test to do. While the full results were never made public, SpaceX ultimately concluded that the explosion was caused by a COPV tank failure. In response, they overhauled both the fueling procedure and the tank design itself. The new COPVs were redesigned to eliminate gaps or folds in the liner, and the helium is now pre-warmed before being loaded into the cryogenic liquid oxygen tanks, a critical change aimed at preventing future disasters. Although the final report found no link to ULA, the relationship between SpaceX and its longtime rival only worsened from there. And it wasn't just paranoia on Musk's part. In the early days of Falcon 9, some ULA employees were reportedly seen driving by SpaceX's rocket development site, mocking their efforts, laughing at the idea that this scrappy startup could ever compete. But the rivalry didn't stop at the launch pad. It spilled into the courtroom. In April 2014, after ULA was awarded an $11 billion sole source contract by the U.S. Air Force to launch high-value military payloads, Musk fired back with a lawsuit. He claimed the deal was unfair, arguing that Falcon 9 could fly those missions at a fraction of the cost of Atlas V or Vulcan Centaur. Musk went so far as to say that the American taxpayer is being ripped off. Eventually, SpaceX and the Air Force reached a settlement. The government agreed to open up certain national security missions to competitive bidding, and over time, SpaceX didn't just compete. That victory paved the way for a series of wins over ULA that continue to this day. Before we jump into the main story, there's an important Starship update we just can't ignore. SpaceX has officially announced a major upgrade for the Super Heavy booster, specifically the installation of a brand new fuel transfer tube into the first next-generation prototype of the rocket. What's really striking is the sheer scale of this upgrade. The redesigned transfer tube is nearly the same size as an entire Falcon 9 first stage. It's responsible for channeling cryogenic fuel from Super Heavy's main tank down to all 33 Raptor engines. And with that, it's expected to unlock major performance improvements, like smoother, more reliable flip maneuvers and the ability to ignite all engines simultaneously during liftoff or landing. Elon Musk also added an important detail. It's more of a fuel header tank than a transfer tube. Has to be very buff, as it is subject to extreme loads and a single leak would be game over. This signals that SpaceX is getting closer than ever to making Starship a stable, high-performance, and rapid launch vehicle. Now, let's get back to the main point. COPVs, or composite overwrapped pressure vessels, have quickly become the most talked about component on Starship right now. And for good reason. People are wondering, how could a part that's supposed to be ultra-durable and costs just a few $dozen end up causing a catastrophic failure that dealt hundreds of millions in damage to SpaceX's infrastructure and timeline? The engineers were just as concerned. They immediately launched a deep-dive investigation to find the root cause of the explosion and, more importantly, how to prevent it from ever happening again. Because without a solution, no one can guarantee that a similar accident won't strike in the future. And given that the Ship 36 incident alone has already set them back by at least 2 months, the pressure to solve this is higher than ever. On July 6th, something unusual happened at SpaceX's McGregor test site in Texas, the same place where they are currently building Raptor 3 engines for the next-gen Starship. A nearby camera caught the moment, a sudden blast, white vapor shooting up at least 30 meters, and what looked like a dark object being thrown into the air. It didn't take long for experts to start speculating. This was likely a dedicated COPV test. And not just any test, it may have been designed to simulate exactly what happened during the Ship 36 incident. In these kinds of tests, engineers often push tanks past their limits, a process called burst testing, by pumping them full of nitrogen, helium, or even cryogenic liquids like liquid nitrogen or oxygen. The goal? See how much pressure they can take before something gives. But that might not be the whole story. This could have also been an environmental test, where they mimic real Starship conditions, like super low temperatures or repeated pressure cycles. That helps reveal any weak spots in the tank, uneven fiber wraps, a flawed liner, or a bad weld. And if there's a defect, the stress can crack it wide open, sending the tank flying and releasing a huge burst of vapor as the cryogenic liquid instantly boils off. By recreating this kind of failure in a controlled setting, SpaceX gets a much clearer picture of what went wrong and how to fix it. These tests are a critical part of making sure Starship flies safer, stronger, and better in the missions to come. So, the big question now is, what exactly did they learn from that test? And more importantly, how does it help improve Starship Flight 10 and every future launch after that? Well, the COPVs SpaceX currently uses for Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and Starship are Type 3 composite overwrapped pressure vessels. These tanks feature a metal liner, usually made of aluminum, wrapped with high-strength composite fibers like carbon fiber or fiberglass. This design allows them to handle extremely high pressures while keeping weight down, which is essential for spaceflight. In terms of performance, these tanks can typically withstand maximum expected operating pressures ranging from 200 to 700 bar, or about 2,900 to over 10,000 psi, depending on the specific design, size, and use case. Now, in burst testing, Type 3 COPVs are pushed far beyond normal limits. They're often tested to 1.5 to 2 times their rated operating pressure. That's anywhere from 300 to 1,400 bar until they rupture. So in this recent test, SpaceX engineers likely gradually increased internal pressure, carefully controlling the flow of gas or cryogenic fluid into the tank until it failed. That allows them to measure the true failure threshold, and from there, adjust the actual flight pressures to stay well below that limit. The end goal? Keep enough usable volume in the tank for flight needs, while adding a larger safety margin, reducing the risk of failure during ascent. Tests like this play a central role in refining the overall Starship system. Both Elon Musk and SpaceX have confirmed that this recent COPV failure was unlike anything they've seen before. Musk noted that a nitrogen COPV failed at a pressure lower than its rated test pressure, a serious issue, especially given the critical role these pressure vessels play in the vehicle's operation. To understand why this matters so much, it's worth looking at what COPVs actually do. They handle tasks like nitrogen purging, flushing systems clean, and pressurizing the turbopumps to spin up the Raptor engines. These tanks, typically filled with high-pressure helium or nitrogen, are essential to engine operation. If a COPV can't maintain pressure, it can trigger a chain reaction that threatens the entire propulsion system. And with each Raptor 2 engine producing up to 230 tons of thrust, and even more expected from the upgraded Raptor 3, the reliability of these pressure vessels is now a top priority for SpaceX. After the Ship 36 explosion, believed to have been caused by a ruptured nitrogen COPV, SpaceX is focusing on eliminating any failure points that could jeopardize upcoming tests or future flights. The immediate goal is to ensure that every COPV can survive burst pressures of 1.5 to 2 times their rated operating pressure, roughly 600 to 1,200 bar, while also withstanding the extreme conditions of spaceflight. That includes cryogenic temperatures below negative 195 degrees Celsius when exposed to liquid nitrogen, as well as intense vibration and stress during launch. Beyond the engineering, SpaceX is also working closely with reliable COPV suppliers, making sure these tanks are better integrated into the rocket structure, with zero tolerance for defects, both before and after flight. Put simply, this simulated failure test at McGregor is a very good sign. It shows that SpaceX is actively working to validate and improve this critical system before moving on to high-risk operations. Right now, Ship 37 is inside Mega Bay 2, awaiting its static fire campaign. That gives engineers a perfect window to implement COPV upgrades and make any other necessary adjustments before the next phase of testing begins. Now that the COPV issue is being addressed, the next question is, how is Ship 37 being prepared for its upcoming flight? Yes, we all know that SpaceX has been modifying the orbital launch mount, reinforcing it with steel frames and support beams to install the Starship stand directly onto the test pad. More specifically, they've been welding the support structure straight onto the OLM, using several I-beams mounted to the top platform. The goal? To place Starship directly on top and perform static fire tests, not just for Ship 37, but possibly for Ship 38 as well. But there's a catch. They'll need a separate ship quick disconnect system to fuel the vehicle, and recently, a new ship QD arm has been spotted inside Megabay 2. It's still unclear whether this one is meant for Pad A, which is being prepped for static testing, or for Pad B, which hasn't had any ship QD system installed yet. That said, using this arm for static fire testing on Pad A seems more likely, especially if Starship is placed directly on the OLM without being lifted by the launch tower. Everything seems to be lining up for an upcoming static fire test of Ship 37, assuming the COPV upgrades are completed in time. Unlike previous tests that mostly focused on engines and tanks, this one will zero in on COPV data, offering a rare real-world environment to validate the redesigned pressure vessels. A static fire test is currently expected to take place in mid-August. Following standard procedure, SpaceX will likely bring Ship 37 back to Megabay 2 afterward for inspections, analysis, and any final installations or upgrades. Once that's done, the OLM will be restored to its original configuration, with all the I-beams and support frames removed in preparation for Starship Flight 10. However, there's a major consideration this time. Unlike the earlier incident at Massey, this upcoming test will happen on Pad A, the main launch site. That means any mishap here could potentially damage critical infrastructure like the launch pad, the tower, or even nearby propellant systems. And that would lead to far greater delays than before. That's why the success of this test is absolutely crucial. If all goes smoothly, we could still see a Starship launch before the end of the month. Based on the current status of both the booster and the ship, that timeline still looks feasible. And this upcoming flight, the 10th, is shaping up to be a milestone moment. In terms of mission objectives, Flight 10 will likely pursue many of the same goals as previous flights. Achieving a clean ascent, reaching orbital velocity, deploying a test payload, verifying engine performance in space, and eventually executing ocean splashdowns for both the booster and the ship. The goal is to iron out lingering issues from earlier flights and build a stable foundation for future missions. This flight could also help SpaceX accelerate toward major year-end targets, with one of the top priorities being to successfully land both stages. That would mark the true beginning of full reusability, a game-changing step toward the company's long-term vision, including proposals for launching up to 25 flights per year from Starbase alone. And to support that kind of rapid launch cadence, SpaceX is now building an Air Separation Unit, or ASU, right at Starbase. It's a huge step toward producing their own liquid oxygen, or LOX, the essential oxidizer that powers the Starship's Raptor engines. In the near future, SpaceX won't need dozens of LOX tankers driving in every week. The new ASU will extract oxygen, nitrogen, and argon directly from the air using cryogenic distillation, reducing reliance on outside suppliers, cutting costs, and simplifying logistics. It's all part of a bigger push to make Starbase fully self-sufficient, especially as launch frequency ramps up. Starship launches demand a massive supply of liquid oxygen, and by producing it on site, SpaceX gains better control, more reliability, and fewer bottlenecks along Highway 4, the only access road to the site. The facility will cover 4.85 acres just north of Highway 4 and include 20 separate structures, all packed into a relatively tight industrial footprint. It's yet another sign that Starbase isn't just a launch site. It's becoming a fully integrated production hub for SpaceX's most ambitious missions. The project is expected to be completed in the next 8 to 12 months. So, what do you think? Are you excited about this major upgrade? If you are, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 150,000 subscribers, and we couldn't do it without your support. Thanks for watching. During Starship's Flight 9 test in late May, we all saw the upper stage, Ship 35, lose control during re-entry. The root cause was traced to a liquid methane leak, which led to unstable pressure in the propulsion system. What's more concerning is that this failure directly impacted the Reaction Control System, or RCS, the system responsible for orienting and stabilizing the ship in space. Its already limited performance, made worse by the pressure drop and some design flaws, caused the vehicle to spiral out of control. Without a functioning RCS, the ship couldn't maintain its flight attitude or carry out any corrective maneuvers. And that's a major problem, especially for future missions involving on-orbit refueling, where precision control is absolutely critical. So how does this system actually work? Well, the RCS is designed to produce small but precise bursts of thrust in any direction, allowing for fine adjustments throughout the flight. These thrusters also create torque, which lets the spacecraft rotate around its axis to control its orientation. A typical RCS setup includes a mix of large and small thrusters, giving the vehicle both coarse and fine control, depending on the mission's needs. RCS systems generally fall into two categories: cold gas thrusters and hot gas thrusters, the latter being what we're about to dive into next. But first, let's take a quick step back. Earlier Starship prototypes were already equipped with cold gas thrusters. From Starhopper all the way to SN15, they use this simpler system. These thrusters work by releasing compressed gas, usually nitrogen, through nozzles to generate thrust. Cold gas thrusters are simple, reliable, and relatively cheap, which makes them ideal for small spacecraft or for attitude control. But there's a trade-off. Their performance is limited. They typically deliver a specific impulse of just 50 to 80 seconds, which is actually pretty low when it comes to keeping a big spacecraft stable in orbit. Back in 2021, while giving Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, a tour of Starbase, Elon Musk revealed that SpaceX planned to equip Super Heavy with cold gas thrusters, while Starship would get Methalox hot gas thrusters instead. When Tim asked why not just use hot gas thrusters on both stages, Elon admitted that setup wouldn't really be ideal for Starship. Strangely, after that interview, hot gas thrusters were never mentioned again and haven't shown up in any of SpaceX's official updates since. Instead, something else started to pop up on both Super Heavy and Starship: extra ullage vent ports. Ullage gas refers to methane or liquid oxygen vapor coming from the propellant tanks, and it suggests that SpaceX is using that gas for the RCS. That's actually a smart move. It's not just convenient using onboard propellants, but these systems also offer slightly better performance, with an estimated ISP of around 70 to 100 seconds. That's a step up from nitrogen-based systems. In fact, even though it hasn't been officially announced, this move pretty much confirms that SpaceX is borrowing the idea straight from Falcon 9. That rocket also uses ullage gas for its RCS, mainly to reorient the booster before disposal by venting gas to rotate it into the right position. Technically, this type of thruster works much like a cold gas system. It produces thrust simply by opening valves and releasing pressurized gas with no combustion involved. And while it's still called cold gas, the ullage gases like methane and oxygen can actually be warmer due to boil-off pressure, which slightly improves thrust efficiency while staying within safe tank limits. Just like on Falcon 9, this setup doesn't use a separate high-pressure nitrogen tank. Instead, it draws gas directly from the main propellant tanks. But the thing is, this approach isn't exactly the best solution. Like I mentioned earlier, cold gas RCS thrusters usually have a pretty low specific impulse, somewhere around 50 to 100 seconds. And they rely on the main fuel tanks, which are complex to design and tricky to keep at safe pressure levels. Any leak or failure in those tanks can knock out the entire control system, exactly like what we saw during Flight 9. A pressure loss in the methane tank ended up crippling the RCS, which couldn't vent ullage gas properly to stabilize the vehicle. And, well, we all know how that turned out. Which is why, right after Starship Flight 9, SpaceX quickly rolled out a plan to switch to hot gas RCS thrusters. Basically, hot gas thrusters work like tiny rocket engines. They burn either monopropellant or bipropellant fuel inside a combustion chamber to generate thrust. They're way more efficient than cold gas thrusters, with a specific impulse in the range of 250 to 300 seconds, making them ideal for RCS applications. SpaceX's hot gas thruster concept for Starship builds on their expertise with Raptor engines, using methane and oxygen or methalox as propellants. These can be stored as either high-pressure gas or as liquids. If implemented, this system could offer 3 to 5 times the efficiency and much stronger thrust compared to cold gas thrusters of the same size. That's a big deal. When you're trying to control massive vehicles, we're talking hundreds or even over 1,000 tons in orbit, especially for something like Starship's orbital refueling configuration, which, when fully loaded, could weigh up to 1,700 tons. Of course, there's no doubt that hot gas thrusters work. They have already been proven on the Space Shuttle. That vehicle was equipped with a full RCS system using 44 hot gas thrusters, split into 2 Types 38 primary thrusters, each producing around 870 pounds of thrust, and 6 vernier thrusters, which were much smaller, producing about 25 pounds of thrust each. These thrusters were located in 3 main sections: the forward RCS pod near the nose, and 2 OMS pods, orbital maneuvering system, at the rear. Thanks to this setup, the Space Shuttle was able to carry out precision maneuvers like docking with the ISS or servicing the Hubble Space Telescope. The 25-pound vernier thrusters were especially useful for fine-tuned adjustments during close approaches, where precision really mattered. That said, this kind of system isn't as easy to integrate as Starship's current RCS. Supporting hot gas thrusters requires a dedicated high-pressure feed system, including separate fuel and oxidizer tanks. For test flights, these might be housed in independent tanks mounted somewhere inside the vehicle. Still, the potential advantages of this setup are hard to ignore. First off, it doesn't rely on pressure from the main tanks to function. So if there's a leak like what we saw in Flight 9, the vehicle could still maintain some level of attitude control, offering a better chance of recovery. And thanks to their higher efficiency, hot gas thrusters need less propellant to do the same job. Plus, they deliver way more thrust compared to nitrogen or even helium-based systems, making them far more effective for orbital maneuvers or keeping the vehicle stable during windy landings. It's still unclear whether SpaceX will implement this system on the remaining 2 Starship Block 2 vehicles, Ship 37 and Ship 38, but chances are they won't. It's more likely that hot gas RCS will only be introduced starting with Starship Block 3. Just to be clear, when I say Block 3, I'm referring to their 142-meter tall version of Starship, not the 150-meter version we talked about before. That taller design has already been scrapped by Elon Musk. Block 3 is a major upgrade of Starship. It features increased height, a much larger propellant capacity, over 1,800 tons just for the upper stage, and an estimated payload to LEO of around 200 tons. It'll also be powered by 9 Raptor 3 engines and equipped with Methalox hot gas thrusters to improve RCS performance. When fully fueled in orbit, the Starship upper stage will weigh between 1,800 and 2,120 tons, requiring 4 to 6 tanker flights to top it off. The addition of hot gas thrusters will significantly improve attitude control, which is absolutely critical for orbital refueling and precision landings. As Elon Musk put it, it's kind of like aerial refueling for aircraft, except in this case, it's orbital refueling for a rocket, and that's something that's never been done before. But compared to Starship Block 3's orbital refueling, aerial refueling is actually much simpler. It takes place within Earth's atmosphere, using kerosene-based fuel, and relies on skilled pilots and specialized equipment. Meanwhile, Starship has to transfer ultra-cold liquid methane and oxygen in microgravity while flying at orbital speeds of around 28,000 kilometers per hour. The process also requires careful alignment and settling of the propellants using the RCS, whether it's ullage gas or hot gas thrusters. Doing that in the vacuum of space with 2 massive vehicles moving at insane speeds is a whole different level of complexity. That's why Starship's RCS, whether based on ullage gas or future hot gas thrusters, plays such a critical role. But RCS isn't the only approach to precision maneuvering in space. Another proven solution, known for both reliability and strong performance, is the hypergolic engine, a completely different kind of thruster. These engines use propellants that ignite instantly upon contact, and SpaceX has plenty of experience with them, particularly in the launch escape system on the Dragon spacecraft. The main advantage of hypergolic propellants is that they remain liquid at room temperature, and engines that use them are extremely easy to ignite reliably and repeatedly. While some large hypergolic engines in launch vehicles use turbopumps, most rely on pressure-fed systems. In these setups, an inert gas like helium is used to pressurize the fuel and oxidizer tanks, pushing the propellants through valves and into the combustion chamber. Since the propellants ignite instantly upon contact, there's no risk of unburned fuel accumulating, which could otherwise lead to catastrophic ignition events. However, traditional hypergolic propellants are highly corrosive, toxic, and even carcinogenic, which means handling and storage require expensive safety procedures. In short, using nitrogen or hypergolic propellants introduces a major problem. They require additional fuels that aren't available on Mars. Hypergolics, in particular, are hazardous to handle and complicate post-landing operations. They also can't be refueled in space or on Mars. In contrast, Methalox hot gas thrusters can recharge their gas tanks by vaporizing the cryogenic propellants already stored on board. Since Starship is designed to refuel on Mars using in-situ resources ISRU, relying on methane and oxygen for its RCS makes the system far more sustainable. That's why Starship's long-term design aims to rely only on resources that can realistically be produced on Mars within the next 30 years. Landing on a drone ship? That's old news, at least when we're talking about Falcon 9. For longtime SpaceX followers, it's almost routine now. Out of 471 successful landings, an impressive 361 have been on drone ships. That's about 75%. And we're not talking about random barges. These are legendary platforms with names like Just Read the Instructions, Of Course I Still Love You, and a shortfall of gravitas. But what if Starship, the giant bound for Mars, could land on a drone ship too? That would be huge. It would grab global attention and spark endless debate, because this isn't just any rocket. This is the one SpaceX is building for Mars. So if it can pull off a clean landing at sea, it means we're one step closer to nailing a gentle leg-powered touchdown on the Martian surface, turning humanity's dream of reaching another world into reality. But to get there, SpaceX still has work to do. They're pouring everything into Starship's test flights, pushing the limits, learning from every launch, and proving this beast can survive the fiery chaos of re-entry. The Massey site is set to undergo major upgrades soon, and a static fire test at Launch Pad A is currently being prepared. If all goes well, Starship Flight 10 is expected to launch sometime in mid-August. Only after these fundamentals are nailed down, re-entry, control, reliability, can SpaceX move on to the next big piece, landing legs. And they're not starting from scratch. In fact, SpaceX has already brought the idea to the FAA, and it's right there in last year's environmental impact statement for Starship launches from LC-39A in Florida, a proposed drone ship landing. Some of the documents also reveal just how ambitious SpaceX's future flight cadence really is. 44 launches per year from Launch Complex, 43A, 25 from Starbase, and up to 76 from Space Launch Complex 37 in Florida. That's not just about sending rockets up. It's a blueprint for a global launch system running at full speed, made possible by rapid reusability. And of course, to launch Starship that often, SpaceX needs more than just fast turnarounds. Recovery and landing logistics have to be just as quick, reliable, and flexible, especially since Starship was designed from the start to be fully reusable. Sure, Mechazilla, those giant catching arms, will be key at fixed launch sites, but what if the tower's down for repairs? You can't rely on one landing method alone. Technically, they could go for a splashdown. But seawater is a nightmare for reusability. It seeps into every part of the ship, causing corrosion and damage. It's slow, it's messy, and it doesn't scale. So instead, SpaceX is eyeing a better option, one they've already mastered, landing on a drone ship. Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy have done it hundreds of times. No tower needed, flexible location, fast recovery. It just works. But here's the catch. Starship isn't Falcon 9. It's nearly 5 times bigger. And that kind of scale brings a whole new level of complexity. So, what's the solution? Let's start with the basics. Firstly, to safely catch Starship, a massive 9-meter wide spacecraft with a dry mass of around 200 tons, you'd need a drone ship that's way larger and more stable than, of course I Still Love You, SpaceX's current landing platform, which spans about 4,500 square meters. Early estimates suggest a Starship-class drone ship would need a landing area of 9,600 to 18,000 square meters. That's 2 to 4 times the size of Sicily, just to accommodate Starship's wide landing footprint and absorb the force from 6 roaring Raptor engines. On top of that, it would need to be heavily reinforced, weighing somewhere between 5,000 and 9,000 tons, 2 to 3 times heavier than today's drone ships, and equipped with a next-gen stabilization system. Think 6 to 8 azimuth thrusters to hold position at sea, and a beefed-up octograbber to clamp down Starship once it's landed, even in rough ocean conditions. But there's a trade-off. A drone ship that big? It's going to struggle with mobility. Just like Osiasley had to remove its wings to squeeze through the Panama Canal, a Starship-class drone ship might not fit at all, making transportation and deployment a serious logistical challenge. But still, it's a trade-off worth making if it means giving Starship one more way to land. Second, another major challenge is recovery time. While a drone ship can be stationed far offshore, usually 200 to 600 kilometers from port, bringing it back with a landed Starship on board typically takes 1 to 3 days, depending on the distance, weather, and ship speed, which averages around 18.5 kilometers per hour. And with Starship being so much bigger than Falcon 9, securing and transporting it is a lot tougher, which could drag out recovery even more and slow down the refurbishment cycle. SpaceX might ease this issue by improving logistics and streamlining post-landing operations. One smart solution, referenced in FAA environmental reviews of Starship ground activities, is called horizontal transport. After landing and securing the vehicle, Starship would be gently lowered from a vertical to a horizontal position using a pivoting mechanism. This approach simplifies transport, lowers structural stress, and makes the rocket less vulnerable to rough seas and high winds. By reducing the center of gravity, it also helps protect the vehicle during the journey back to shore. Third, this is the toughest hardware challenge SpaceX needs to crack. To land Starship on a drone ship, the vehicle will absolutely need some kind of landing legs that can be deployed for the job. And if they do go that route, we're likely looking at retractable legs made from stainless steel, possibly reinforced with titanium or ultra-strong alloys at the joints and shock-absorbing parts, places that take the most punishment. Now here's the thing. Starship, when dry, weighs about 100 tons, roughly the weight of a fully loaded Boeing 747. So the legs won't just need to hold it upright. They'll also have to absorb the impact of landing, which is like dropping a giant steel skyscraper from a slow-moving elevator about 2 meters per second and making sure it doesn't tip, dent, or break. To do that, SpaceX would need a shock system strong enough to handle the force of a full-speed truck crash per leg. That's why these legs can't just be thin metal sticks. They've got to be thick, sturdy, and smart. And because Starship needs to land in all kinds of places, drone ships, the moon, even Mars, the legs have to be versatile too. They'll need wide foot pads to prevent sinking into soft soil or sliding on uneven terrain. Maybe even adjustable lengths, so the rocket can balance itself on a slope, or adapt to different gravity, like 1/6 gravity on the moon, or 1/3 on Mars. For sea landings, there's one more challenge. The ocean never stands still. Waves can rock the drone ship slightly, so the legs might need some kind of locking or stabilization system to keep Starship steady once it touches down. And if SpaceX can pull this off, these legs won't just support the rocket, they'll support the entire vision of a multi-planetary future. So, when will these landing legs and huge drone ships actually show up? Well, not just yet, but we're getting closer. Right now, SpaceX is still focusing on perfecting Starship's re-entry, especially surviving those insane temperatures when it comes back from space. As Elon Musk put it, we need to perfect ship re-entry at extreme temperatures before attempting to catch the ship with the tower arms, like the booster. In other words, Musk's priority is mastering tower landings first, something expected to happen later this year. Only after that will they turn their full attention to developing a landing leg system. And based on how long it took with Falcon 9, it won't be instant. SpaceX first floated the idea of Falcon landing legs in 2011, then unveiled the design in May 2013, a setup using carbon fiber with aluminum honeycomb, and a telescoping piston mechanism housed inside an A-frame structure. When deployed, the legs spanned about 18 meters wide and weighed just under 2,100 kilograms. The system was powered by high-pressure helium. It wasn't until 2016 that the design was fully refined and put into regular use. So if we follow that same timeline, we could see a landing leg-equipped Starship emerge around 2026, and it'll likely be the first version of the Starship HLS, built for NASA's Artemis program. In fact, SpaceX has been working on HLS for years now. In April 2024, NASA and SpaceX conducted a simulated test with astronauts Doug Wheelock and Peggy Whitson wearing Axiom spacesuits to evaluate the layout of the airlock, elevator, and floor design of the HLS version at SpaceX HQ in Hawthorne, California. And yes, that elevator is designed to carry both astronauts and cargo down from the crew cabin, which sits nearly 50 meters above the lunar surface, about as tall as a 15-story building. SpaceX has also converted Ship 22's nose section into a mock-up HLS crew module for design testing and astronaut training. And recently, new photos have surfaced showing what looks like a hatch-equipped HLS module, a promising sign that development is moving ahead. All of this has reassured NASA that development remains on schedule, and that SpaceX is making steady progress toward delivering a flight-ready lunar lander. But while the HLS program gains momentum back at Starbase, SpaceX is still navigating challenges with its high flight cadence, especially following the recent Ship 36 incident. In Florida, the Starship infrastructure at Kennedy Space Center is coming together, but much of it is still under construction. That means, before we see a full-scale drone ship landing, SpaceX will likely continue focusing on Mechazilla-based recoveries at fixed launch sites. These tower catches offer tighter control, quicker turnaround, and are ideal for building up operational experience and consistency. But once those systems are dialed in, and enough flight data has been gathered from these controlled tower landings, the drone ship platform will start to play a bigger role. And that, right there, will be the next big leap, expanding Starship's reach and proving that recovery operations can go far beyond the shore. With these pieces falling into place, it's becoming more and more likely that we'll see the first steps of Starship drone ship operations by mid to late next year. Until then, SpaceX will keep fine-tuning its landing procedures, collecting re-entry data, and increasing precision. Only when those systems are proven and reliable will the focus shift to offshore operations. Because in the end, the goal is clear: to match and eventually surpass the performance and flexibility of Falcon 9. And how fitting is it? Just as Starship sets its sights on drone ships, Falcon 9 has once again reminded us of the power of sea-based recovery by breaking another record. On June 6th, the Draft Environmental Impact Statement EIS for Starship launches from Space Launch Complex 37, Florida, was released by the Department of the Air Force. Incredibly, just 6 days later, on June 12th, SLC-37 was officially demolished. An explosive at the base of the tower engulfed the entire complex structure. SLC-37 collapsed, ending its 60-year reign on the waterfront of Space Coast. The process happened so quickly that it was surprising, but it's not a regret, because a new chapter named Starship. SpaceX will revive SLC-37 with a new era that is brighter and busier than ever. The rapid work process is enough to prove SpaceX's strong determination to clear the way for Starship launches from the Florida Space Coast. From that moment on, we were more certain that Starship operations in Florida were no longer a vague speculation, and that modern and majestic launch pads would gradually rise at this location, opening a new chapter, faster, cheaper, and more ambitious than ever. By contrast, ULA seems stuck in a slower era, reliable, perhaps, but no longer a speed-oriented one. The EIS planned for two 180-meter launch systems to be built at the SLC-37 complex. These towers would be taller than the POB-A at Starbase, Texas, which is 146.3 meters tall. The associated facilities would include 2 launch pads, 2 larger launch towers, 2 frame trench systems, and 2 additional tank farms. The draft environmental impact statement also states that the reason for SpaceX to establish the launch site at SLC-37 is that Starship's ability to move cargo and people from one point to another is suitable for supporting national security launches, which are currently supported by the company's Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets. The draft also explained the issue of why SLC-37 is being used, while SpaceX has 3 other launch pads which ready or about to be ready for missions. The main reason is that neither OLM-A nor OLM-B is located on a military base, but is under the sole control of SpaceX and the Texas government. Next is LC-39A. Although located near a military base, it is not feasible to launch and capture continuously. In terms of deployment capability, LC-39A is only targeted for 44 launches per year, while the measurement of Launch Complex 37 is suitable for the required launch rate of 76 launches per year. No doubt, because the desired operational range under Starship support is clearly mentioned in the EIS. The real property agreement, license, and approvals would support the proposed Starship Super Heavy operations at CCSFS, including up to 76 launches and 152 landings annually, 76 per stage, the report states. With each launch including 2 landings, this would require 228 launch pad operations for a total of 76 launches per year. Only SLC-37, with its large isolated space and proximity to the coast, will be more conducive to high-frequency Starship launches. In addition, SpaceX's development at SLC-37 will include redevelopment of surrounding areas to support Starship Super Heavy launches and landings. Routes such as Phillips Parkway from SLC-37 to Pad A Loop on KSC, approximately 7 miles long, will be widened, as will the old A1A, approximately 1 mile long from SLC-37 to Phillips Parkway. SpaceX will also add a turn radius at the northeast corner of Phillips Parkway and Patrol Road, and a second turn radius at the northwest corner of Patrol Road and Beach Road. By the time you watch this video, the entire SLC-37 structure is now just a pile of ash that is rapidly completing the process of being cleared from where it once belonged to make way for the giant Starship rockets. Once the Holy Land of ULA, dominated by Delta IV launches, but now it has effectively disappeared with the end of this heavy rocket. Is this proof that SpaceX is crushing ULA, not just in the sky, but on the ground as well? SLC-37 was originally built to support the Apollo program. The complex consists of 2 launch pads, LC-37A and SLC-37B. However, Pad 37A has never been used, while 37B has seen historic launches. Saturn Farm and Saturn IB in the 1960s, as well as Delta IV and Delta IV heavy launches from 2002 to 2024. In 60 years, 43 launches have been recorded, of which 8 were Saturn I and Saturn IB rockets. The remaining 35 were Delta IV rockets. However, it ended its tenure in April 2024, right at SLC-37 with the NROL-70 mission, also putting an end to ULA's Delta rockets, and ULA gave up its lease on the site. In addition, ULA currently has only 2 active rockets, Atlas V and Vulcan Centaur. However, Atlas V is announced to be retired. Starting from April 2025, there are still 14 launches to complete, including 7 Project Kuiper of Amazon. So, only Vulcan Centaur, the new generation rocket of ULA, will continue to operate. The Vulcan Centaur was developed primarily to compete with SpaceX's Falcon 9 and to comply with a congressional order to phase out the use of the Russian-made RD-180 engine that powers the Atlas V. The Vulcan Centaur has now completed 2 certification flights. Cert 1 on January 8, 2024, marked the start of the rocket's delivery of the Peregrine lander payload to the Moon. It was not until October 4, 2024, that the Vulcan Centaur lifted off on the second of 2 flights required to certify the rocket for NSSL missions. Cert 2 However, CERT-2 was not as smooth sailing when the nozzle on one of the solid rocket boosters fell off 37 seconds after launch, creating a shower of debris in the exhaust, although it still achieved acceptable orbital insertion. On March 26, 2025, the Vulcan rocket was certified by the U.S. Space Force to conduct national security space launch missions. The U.S. Space Force said it expects Vulcan to launch 11 national security missions this year. But let's not forget, it's mid-June now, and we're not sure if they can meet that expectation when the number of launch missions that ULA can undertake each year is extremely low. So, their withdrawal from SLC-37 might be a smart choice to avoid wasting budget, while the Vulcan rocket is trying to prove its precarious capabilities. Look at the development process of ULA. You can clearly see why we say that. Since its founding in 2006, ULA has reduced its launch facilities from 7 to 2. Space Launch Complex 41 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Cape Canaveral, Florida, and Space Launch Complex 3 at Vandenberg Air Force Base near Lompoc, California. The reason for this is largely inevitable, as ULA's annual launch rate has been reduced, with the launch pads being cut back as well. From 2006, ULA launched about 11 rockets per year, and now the company averages about 6 launches per year. Meanwhile, look at SpaceX. Their Falcon 9 rocket alone will have launched 91 times in 2023, 134 times in 2024, and about 71 times by June 2025. Just last week, SpaceX celebrated the 500th launch of their Falcon rocket line. SpaceX now seems to have left their competitors too far behind. Not only that, with their Starship rocket, it is promised to dominate the launch market even more strongly and gradually replace their Falcon 9 or Dragon. Starship is planned with hundreds of launches per year, so it is natural to continuously expand its market share and build more support structures. Their second Starship launch pad at Starbase is also about to be completed, with 25 launches per year at Starbase alone. Approved by the FAA, the launch pad at LC-39A, Kennedy Space Center, is planned with 44 launches per year. It is still not enough for Starship's plan, so leasing the SLC-37 launch pad is necessary. Because while ULA is redundant with 3 launch pads but can only launch 6 times per year, it is understandable to give it to SpaceX. Now, the EIS still needs to complete a public comment period to gather public input. The DAF will collect public comments and evaluate them to make final revisions to the EIS before releasing a formal report. Any factors that arise from the confirmed community comments will have a major impact on the decision to legally operate Starship at the site. The public comment period will last for 45 days starting June 13th, with comments being collected primarily online and in virtual meetings. The final meeting is scheduled for July 25th to 28th. A final draft environmental impact statement will be compiled and released shortly thereafter. To complete the EIS, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, will review it for official approval. If all goes according to plan, the final EIS will be released in the fall of 2025. In fact, there is the matter of the recent rift between SpaceX founder Elon Musk and U.S. President Donald Trump that makes us wonder how smooth the approval process for SpaceX will actually be. While the threat of canceling Dragon launches has been withdrawn, who knows what difficulties may arise next and whether it could threaten Starship operations. Seriously, the announcement of the EIS certainly provides some assurance that Starship operations will have strong support from the U.S. Air Force, primarily on national security grounds. The potential issues that were considered concerns during the initial public comment period of the EIS are no longer concerns. Its safety for the environment and surrounding areas during the launch has been approved, reflecting the positive and welcoming reception of the people around the area. According to the draft, detailed studies and analyses show that SpaceX's planned activities at this launch complex will not cause any significant negative impacts on key factors such as the ecological environment or the residential communities around the launch site. SpaceX is building a gigabay located at Roberts Road in Kennedy Space Center. This facility is partially completed, not expected to be completed until late 2026 or even later. Giga Bay is built to install and refurbish starships operating on the Space Coast, instead of having to transport them by sea from Starbase in Texas. SpaceX's proposal for launches in Florida is 44 launches at Launch Complex, 39A, and 76 launches at Space Launch Complex, 37. A total of up to 120 launches per year in Florida alone. The Giga Bay facility in Florida will play an extremely important role in ensuring both the quantity and quality of Starship vehicles operating here, predicting that the number of Starships that can be produced at this facility up to 100 Starships per year. On the other hand, the SLC-37 site has just been demolished to pass the EIS and get the official operating license as early as this fall. In case SpaceX officially operates at this site, the entire construction process to complete will take at least 1 year. That is, by the end of 2026, it can officially operate. Based on the interest in the potential of Starship by the U.S. Air Force, as well as the new draft released last week, the future of spaceflight in Florida will be increasingly majestic with Starship operations. We dare say it will be a scene that we will only be able to see in science fiction movies. Something that seemed impossible to come true is gradually being realized by Elon Musk. Surely then, our journey to the stars will be easier than ever. To the moon? Or, further away, Mars? Venus? At that time, it was as simple as buying a bus ticket, getting on, sleeping, and arriving, then getting on again and going